In 1964 and 1972, the Igls track in Austria was an Olympic venue, and today it plays out the final deal of the cards as we line up for the 2014 Winter Games. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. Alongside me in the booth here at Igls is Kurt Tomasevich from the Team USA as we get into the second and deciding run of our penultimate two-man bobsleigh race of the season. And Kurt, as ever here at Igls, tight technical track, so close between the sleds.
Yeah, definitely. The top four are really separated only by a few hundredths of a second. At least fourth, third, and second place are just by a few hundredths of a second. Holcomb's got a good lead out in front. It's going to be a great second race, second heat.
Well, the Germans are in with a shout as well, and the Russians too. You saw Francesco Friedrich, the two-man world champion, in fourth place. Alexander Zubkov lies in third, 28 hundredths of a second, covering the top four. Zubkov in the medal positions yet again. And Kurt, second, third, and fourth. Bert Hefty here second, and the two we've just seen covered by just a hair's breadth, literally a pocket handkerchief apart at the line.
Yeah, we mentioned that FIBT isn't using his top brakeman that he usually uses in Bauman, but you know, FIBT always a competitor, and this is where he always does well. It's a great start and a consistent drive.
And if they are tight together, the man who leads after the first heat is that step ahead. Stephen Holcomb and Stephen Langton pushed a great start. Only fifth quickest as it turned out in the end, but what a sublime drive down the track. The BMW sled speeding away over 2/10 clear of the field on a track where habitually we're talking hundreds.
Yeah, usually the sleds coming down this hill are very tight and very close, but 22 hundredths of a second ahead, that's a huge lead going into the second heat for Holcomb.
And look at the group behind, from Hefty in second down to Kibasmanis and Melbardis, the Latvians, just a 1/10 of a second. Holcomb will go last on the ice as the fast 20 go in reverse order. And that, too, may have a bearing on the outcome of this final Olympic points race. It's not the last race of the season. Thomas Florschutz, along with everybody else, getting warmed up. Air temperature, well, I'm not quite sure it's +7 anymore. It does feel quite balmy, but the ice -2, and the temperature now, the sun's been gone for a couple of hours, may drop. Francesco Friedrich will be one of the last to go. Only time will tell us, Kurt Tomasevich, exactly what will happen to the ice in this second and deciding heat.
History has told us this track deteriorates pretty rapidly. After the first few sleds go down, the ice gets a little brittle and falls apart, so the downtimes aren't as quick. So we'll see how that happens in the second heat.
So here we go with Jan Verber of the Czech Republic. He'll be the first of our 20 sleds. He bumped John Jackson of Great Britain to go into the race. 4 sleds don't get a second heat, 20 down to 1, with our last sled on the ice being the man who will defend a substantial lead. We'll have to see how close this gets. First man and last man on the track today, Stephen Holcomb. Into the second and deciding run in round 7 of 8 of the Wiesmann two-man bobsleigh World Cup for this season. Czech Republic's Jan Verber, 31-year-old sports instructor, just squeezed himself into this top 20.
Now, we talked about the entire track slowing down quite a bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the start is going to slow down. Typically, it does just a little bit. They pushed a 5:15 in the first heat. No, now a 5:21 in this second heat. That's not very consistent at all.
Well, now, having started the afternoon in sunshine, the earlier sliders were sliding in the daylight, the later in mixed conditions. Now it is a night race for the second heat, and that may make it a little easier for the drivers to pick up their lines.
Yeah, a little bit. Right here's a great example. Going through Kreisel, you can see him going from dark to light, dark to light. Some pilots don't have a problem with that, and they may use a tinted visor or a yellow shaded visor, some use goggles, whatever it is. It's not always easy to combat the darkness.
101.8, 63 miles an hour, 76 miles an hour now, almost as quickly as you can say it. He's picked up 15 miles an hour by the bottom of the track. 52.63 slide. Now that's quicker than his first run, which is a 52.76. And if the track is going to continue to slow down as the ice gets more worn away, by these runners and more gouged by the runners, then we should see the field concertinaing as the later runners have slower runs, respectively.
Yeah, that's going to tighten the field a little bit, but it takes a good drive in order to improve your run down the track, even with deteriorating ice.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. Coming out of curve 9 here into a little bit of a straightaway, very late coming off, but keeps the sled very straight, so it wasn't too bad of a line for him. Toward the bottom, in between curves 12 and 13, I think, in the second labyrinth, this is where the sleds are moving the fastest in the entire track, and sometimes that's where we might see a little bit of a flop, and it gets a little bit hard to control the sled there sometimes, but for the most part, this is a pretty easy track for drivers to get down, at least safely.
Jan Verber, first sled on the ice, is our race leader. Next up, Alexander Kasyanov of Russia with Maxim Belugin behind him. 18th only at the start, and that means 19th at the bottom. Here, your start is so often directly related to your speed down the rest of the track.
Yeah, unless you make a very critical mistake, your start rank to finish rank isn't going to vary more than plus or minus about 3 or 4 spots usually.
Let's see if they can improve dramatically on a 5:21. Didn't look to be any major hiccups at the start in the first time, and that proves to be the case. 5:26, like Jan Verber, 0.05 of a second slower than their first run.
Yep, but already in the red, so they didn't have a really good start velocity, even though they outpushed it by a couple hundredths of a second. You know, it's not just the time that it takes to get to the first 50 meters, it's the speed at which you cross that 50-meter mark too.
They were nearly half a kilometre an hour down in that first speed trap. They're about level with Verber now, and they have levelled up on time. It was 900s faster in the first heat than the Czech. Now he's slipped behind again. 101.7, not as quick as Verber's 101.8. It's not going to help him.
Yeah, but now he's down to 100th of a second difference. Man, these guys are going back and forth. It was -4 to +1, then even, now +3.
Snakes and ladders, and he comes in 100th in front to defend his spot in 19th place. Brakeman hauling hard on those brakes to try and get this 700-kilo flying monster slowed down.
Yeah, Alexander Kasyanov, he's definitely a much better 4-man pilot. You know, today, I'm sure he expected to do much better than, you know, battling for 18th, 19th, 20th place. But he's definitely going to do better tomorrow, and that's where we'll see him excel.
He'd better. 19th is not going to cut it for the Russians with Sochi less than a month away. And the closing ceremony now is closing on a month away. There is Kasyanov. With Alexander Kasyanov leading by 100th of a second. The next sled on the ice is either going to pass both that preceded it or drop behind both, unlikely to slip in the 100th gap. That's Frenchman Loic Kosterg. His suit ripped by his brakeman Roman Heinrich 2 races ago. The needle spikes as you leap in behind your brakeman. The idea is to thread your legs around him, around your driver. But unfortunately, in the hurry to get in, it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, as a brakeman, a lot of times you like to blame the driver for not getting in quick enough. So.
The driver always will be complaining that he's having to pull you down the track, so...
Everybody pointing fingers at each other.
That's the team nature of it, spurring each other on.
They had a 5:25 start time in the first heat, which was a rank of 19. Not a great start time. Same start time this heat, which was the first team to actually be consistent with their start rank, at least.
See Heinrich in the back there, with his almost with his chin on the floor of the sled, doubled over so much to stay out of the airflow. 900s up on the Russians. They were 100th in front from the first heat.
That's one thing a lot of people don't think about is, you know, when the brakeman's riding in the sled, this is after they've been, you know, getting all the adrenaline going, huffing and puffing, then they sprint for 50 meters, and then they get into a position where they can't breathe, so they've got a helmet, and sometimes even a visor in their face, so that's a very claustrophobic, uncomfortable feeling.
Good run from the Frenchman, 124 kilometers an hour, 77.1 miles an hour. He's going to take the lead here comfortably. 2 best results of the season have been 14th spots. I wonder if he can rise a couple up the order.
Kasyanov, the Russian team, just kind of puts his hands in the air and says, I don't know what I did wrong. I'm open to suggestions, but tomorrow he's going to definitely have a much better run in the 4-man race.
Well, Russia too, trounced by the French. That's not what they want a couple of weeks before the Olympic Games. Le Costega France is our race leader, reversing up through the labyrinth. Look at that. You just talked about this a little earlier, Kurt, how you can get away from you here down at the bottom of the track.
12-13 is going to be the mild problem spot of the track, I guess, if you can really consider a problem spot on this track. You can see his runners kind of popped up on the right side as he was entering a right-hand curve, which means you could roll the sled into a curve, which is not as common as flipping the sled out of the exit of a curve, but still a way to crash and end up on your head.
Edwin van Kalker of the Netherlands with Jeroen Pick behind him, tied for 16th spot after the first heat, and he will need a top 10 finish here, now, in this heat, to guarantee that the Dutch will allow him to take the two-man sled to the games to go with his four-man.
Yeah, Edwin needs that top 10, excuse me, that top 8 here, and he's going to need a lot of help.
But now the deal
just
is,
may not come.
The deal is, having gained a top 8 last year, he only needs a top 10 in World Cup this year, I'm told. So, even so, from 16th spot, or tied 16th, that's going to be a tough ask. He needs the ride of his life here.
Pretty good start time of 5:19. In the first heat, they pushed to 5:18, but that was a rank of 16th, and they ended up tied for 16th at the bottom of the hill. So again, we talked about how you're not going to vary your start rank to finish rank very much. He needed a top 10 push, and I just don't know if a 5:19 in this heat is going to get him there.
Unfortunately, his top 10 push brakeman Sibren Jansma, injured in Winterberg, is unlikely to compete again this season. 101.5, not as quick as the French sled, which is a flyer, by the way. Yeah. 122.8. Well, he's still in the lead, but the gap's halved from 26 to 1200s to 500s. Well, that was close. He has the lead at the moment. The dream may not yet be over, but it is hanging by the slenderest of threads for the Dutch two-man hopes.
Yeah, you just mentioned it exactly. The dream is still alive, but for the next 4 or 5 sleds to drop behind that kind of a run probably isn't very likely. You know, just not as clean and sharp coming out of curve 6 and into Kreisel. Good height, and you can see on the exit of this Kreisel, coming through that very bright spot, comes off a little bit early, and then takes a little rise at the very end. Not much, it's very subtle, but that can cause the difference.
Well, there is Edwin. He needs 7 sleds to drop behind him now. It's out of his hands. About a dramatic way to get Olympic qualification or to have it snatched. Well, now Nick Cunningham with Andreas Dreibel. First time on the back of the sled of the man from Monterey for Andreas. Well, it turns out that not only can he push the Dickens, he can play up a storm on the piano as well.
Yeah, this is a big test for Andreas, you know, pushing with the driver, racing with him for the first time. Andreas really fighting to prove that he wants to be on that Olympic team, and that's the position a lot of brakemen are in this week. 5:16 start time. Pretty competitive. In the first heat, they pushed to 5:15, so again, they didn't fall off as much as some sleds that we've seen so far this heat.
Of course, if 2 sleds or 3 sleds go from the USA, the drivers are set because they know who they are. For the brakemen, though, there's the chance to get in as a 2-man brakeman, as a 4-man brakeman, as part of the team, or not, because there are more brakemen on the squad than you can take. So there's so many little battles going on here.
Very late coming out of curve 9 and into 10.
That might cost him. 102.2 is the best speed we've seen there, barring the French sled. 123.4 at the bottom. Again, the French sled was quicker than that.
Yeah. Cunningham accelerating away from a 1/10 of a second, across the line, 0.17 of a second ahead. Fastest time we've seen so far this heat. So pretty decent run despite a mistake or 2.
And that was 1100s quicker than his first run. So there is still speed to be found if you can tidy up.
It's good to see Nick with a smile finishing a race this year. At least this week. You know, last week he crashed in the 4-man race in St. Moritz and kind of had a sour taste in his mouth going through all this week of practice. But here you can see how he was late out of the corner of curve 9. He came down a little bit early and that put him up at the end, that last pressure. So it kind of came down pretty hard, but still had great speed. That BMW sled, very aerodynamic, and that allowed him to accelerate away.
Nick Cunningham, Andreas Dreibel, the race leaders. 5 of our 20 sleds down here in the final heat of the 2-man competition in Igls, Austria.
Now this was a very tight battle. Again, we just mentioned there was a tight for 16th position.
Welcome back to Igls in Austria. Simone Bertazzo and Francesco Costa at the top of the track in the booth calling the action. Martin Haven and Team USA's Kurt Tomasevich. And some very, very close racing. We had a tie for 16th place. 100th in front of that was this 15th placed Italian sled. And Kurt, every ounce of your fiber now in the push is going to be critical.
What's really interesting too is that when you're talking about 16th position down to about 12th position, those are the positions where if you win in a Europa Cup race or a America's Cup race, that's the type of points that you get. So you're not only competing with the sleds around this World Cup competition here that are battling you for 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, but you're battling some sleds that aren't even here. The Europa Cup race that took place today in St. Moritz, Switzerland, there's going to be some battles that we can't see actually unfold here, but we'll see them on points later on today.
Right there, he's got to get this sled back under control. It's running ahead of him at the moment.
Very late, a lot of skids, a couple taps coming through there.
Not bad speed, still in front of Cunningham, 400ths of a second. Last corner will decide it, 1:23.5, a whisker quicker. Will he stay in front of the Americans? He does by 300ths of a second. Well, he doubled his first heat advantage over them from 1 to 300ths. In fact, that's tripled it.
Quite a battle between those two, but Simone just edges out Nick there.
300ths of a second. Just over 2 kilometers of ice, 2.5 kilometers of ice.
Here's that exit out of out of Kreisel, I believe. Yeah, very, very late there. Really high, almost takes out the camera right there. And as he comes down out of curve 9. Out of curve 9 as well. He has a tough time controlling this sled and takes a couple taps on the left.
Simone Bertazzo is our race leader with 14 sleds to go, and the next man on the ice was 200ths quicker than Bertazzo. So we had 4 sleds here in this little knot covered by 300ths of a second. You want close? I'll give you close. Linda Rush with Lascelles Brown behind him. 8th fastest in the start, but a little bit of a loose trip down the ice. So Lyndon has got room to tidy up and improve.
Yeah, I would say of the sleds we've seen so far, Lyndon has not quite performed up to his potential and expectation. He doesn't like battling for 14th place. He's ranked number 7 in the world right now. Comes out of the grooves a little early, but saves it. Doesn't quite hit that wall. But that could hurt his start velocity. Probably might not affect the start time of a 5:13, but a 50.6 doesn't quite correlate with a 5:13 start time.
Well, it was when Lascelles landed in the sled, it kicked the tail out a little. Very hard to get into these sleds, very hard to get in square and soft. 89.1 kilometers an hour. He's got good speed here. He's the quickest sled we've seen so far.
1600ths of a second ahead. He's starting to pull away, but again, just not a real clean drive from Lyndon.
Italians are a little quicker at this stage, so the gap is coming down. 1:23.3. It'll come down maybe into single digits. And it is 1300ths of a second at the line. He stays in front, and that's an improvement from Lyndon. He was 200ths in front of the Italians after the first heat. Tidied up corner 9 a little better. Still, another trip down could get better again, but there are no more trips today.
See Lascelles shaking his head with a 5:13 push. Again, he pushed incredibly well last week in St. Moritz, Switzerland with Lyndon. Really turned some heads. 5:13 here this week. I think he's a little bit disappointed in that. But here you can see exactly when the grooves ended. They became really shallow. Lyndon saved the sled from taking a tap off there, but it wasn't quite the direct line right out of the grooves.
Long skid down the straightaway. When the runners aren't going forward, they are slowing you down. 5:13 again, said King. That's an athlete, never satisfied. Linda Rush of Canada is our race leader. Next, Benny Meyer of Austria with Markus Sammer behind him. Benny Meyer, 19-year-old student. 19 years old, that's not student, that's schoolboy, isn't it? From Austria, from Rum, just outside of Innsbruck. And his dad is the team coach. Is this teenager going to represent Austria in Sochi?
One advantage he might have is at 19 years old, you kind of have a feeling of immortality. Nothing can hurt you, nothing can get in your way. A little bit of ignorance, maybe. You don't know what you're going against. So, it's really exciting to see him do well here.
Well, 5:20 getaway. Now let's see whether, I'm not sure exactly what the Olympic criterion is for Austria, but this young guy could well be the saving for Austrian bobsledding. If he doesn't go, they won't have a men's representative for the first time ever in an Olympic bobsleigh competition.
Now it's going to be really hard for him to catch Lyndon Rush. Lyndon has a lot more experience than he does in a much better start time. So the Austrian team here, they're really going to have to do something amazing in order to catch Lyndon. 0.06 of a second back, though. He's starting to reel in the Canadians. This is pretty incredible.
Good speed at the bottom as well. And 700s away at the bottom with a 52.40. Giving away maybe a decade of experience, but from the look on the faces of the coaches, I think that might be enough. I think this kid may well be going to Sochi to represent his nation in bobsledding.
Well, we know he's not going to finish any worse than 14th position in this race. And if that meets their qualification, then that's great for him. Coming out of Kreisel right here, you can see light to dark, and a lot of drivers use those as landmarks of where to steer. But missed his landmark a little bit and flopped off the end of that exit pretty hard. Curve 12 into 13, 13 into 14. Kind of an aggressive exit there as well.
So Benny Meyer, originally a skeleton slider like his brother Raphael. And there might be a big family concern going to the games with Raf and Benny and their dad Max. Next up, Max Arndt of Germany with Marco Hubenbecker behind him. And Hubi's four-man failure to load in Winterberg last year, still on our intro roll. That'll haunt him for several years. 20-second start time here. So to be in 12th position is indication of just what a good drive they had.
Yeah, the German team, of course, they have driving, they have equipment, but for them to be a 22nd rank at the start, lots of problems.
Is an absolute disaster. The driver could not get in, had no control of the sled that had its own way down into the first corner and slammed into the wall where the luge start joins the track.
Yeah, whatever happens now down the track is a wash. He's 34/100ths of a second back. That mistake at the top is just impossible to come back from.
Well, at least it was in the second heat. In the first heat, that would probably mean he missed the cut. Here, he can't drop out of the top 20 because only 20 sleds slide. But oh boy, that's a disaster.
So no matter what happens here, the rest of the program, the rest of the field, they're going to move up a spot. So we just talked about how the Austrians may be disappointed. They dropped from 13th to 14th. Well, they're now back up in 13th.
1:23.8 at the bottom, still best speed apart from Loic Kosterg of France. What could have been a 52.70 slide for Max Arndt, and he buries his head in despair.
Wow, just lots of problems when the driver loaded into the sled. It's going to be interesting to see the replay and find out exactly what happened. He's trying to explain it to Matthias Hoffner there. Everything looked great here. Good, solid push off the block. Both athletes driving pretty hard. But the driver's load into the sled. Catches his feet on something right there, hangs up a little bit, doesn't have time to get to the D-rings to pull the sled straight. Push bar takes a while to get in. Disaster.
Well, could hardly imagine it being any worse unless Hubenbecker hadn't made it into the sled. So Max Arndt slips not quite to the tail of the field. 6 of the 9 sleds that have gone down. That means he may end up no better than 17th. Rico Bader of Switzerland now with Jörg Egger, who's in 11th spot after the first heat. 100th out of a top 10 finish. This is only his second, third race of the World Cup campaign.
Yeah, he didn't compete in North America, so to see him on these European tracks, see him do well, that's that's good for their program. 5:14 start from Jürgen in the first heat.
The reason he's got in here post-Christmas is that he has overhauled Gregor Baumann. Gregor missed all of last year through lack of fitness, recovering from an abscess in a tooth and a couple of other physical problems. Rico Peter wasn't quite fit at the beginning of the season, but has come back strong.
Little tap coming between curves 3 and 4. That's going to cost him a little because you need to keep all the start velocity that you have at the top of this track because it really doesn't drop off and you don't gain speed until a little bit lower.
89 kilometers an hour is the best speed we have seen so far. Top speed 102.7. Oh, huge slide. 102.9 is quicker, but that will all ebb away. Will he get into the 124s at the bottom? He still does. These Citius sleds on these high-speed sections of the track really cleave the air superbly. And a 52.24 of what was a pretty ugly ride to take the lead of the race and challenge for a top 10 finish. Somehow that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great to see. Somehow he pulled it together. Didn't have the cleanest of runs, like I mentioned, that unfamiliar tap of any driver in between curves 3 and 4. And I believe this is the exit out of curve 9. Or excuse me, this is between 3 and 4 there. You can see that tap right there that I was talking about. Here's the exit of curve 9 into the straightaway and just can't keep the sled very straight.
Swaying away at the back, Rico Peter is our race leader from Linden Rush, and Benny Meyer, they're the top 3 with 10 of our 20 sleds down. 10 still to come. Leader Stephen Holcomb of the USA will be the last to go. Well, cold and dark out, not that cold, but with the races here in the World Cup earning more points, as you said a little earlier, Kurt, you can also race in the second tier in North America and in Europe. Those 2 cups earn you about half the points for a win that they would here, but you can do both sometimes. And today there was a race this morning in St. Moritz and a race this evening, 2 hours drive away here in Igls, and so teams have managed to combine that.
Yeah, it's very rare that you have the opportunity to do that. Sometimes teams will try that, back-to-back weekends, but 2 races in the same day on different tracks is incredible to do, and this is about the only 2 locations where that can happen. It's just a short 2-hour drive apart. So trying to earn points on the Europa Cup as well as the World Cup circuit is what a lot of people are trying to do.
Former Swiss legend and world champion Hans Hilterbrand celebrates his birthday today, 45, I believe he said it was. I think he started counting backwards from 60. But still a great fan of bobsledding and a great totem for Swiss sliding. And of course, a sled builder for many years. The man who first brought Teflon-coated runners into the sport, which then shepherded in the rule that you're not allowed to have any coating on the runners. And talking to him about that the other week in Winterberg, and he said, honestly, I don't know whether they were any quicker, but the key thing was all his rivals thought they were quicker, and that's not the advantage, being mechanical, it's being in the head. 77 world champion Hans Hilterbrand, multiple Olympic medalist for Switzerland. Not an Olympic medalist in all his career. Okay. So, with the final 10 sleds still to go here, we are getting ready for the track to come live again. 10 to go in Innsbruck, Austria. Penultimate race of the Wiesmann 2-man bobsleigh World Cup. And Corey Butner and Chuck Berkeley off a big start for the USA sled in the top 10. And if they can pick up 0.05 of a second, they could pick up as many as 4 or 5 spots. There's your current leaders. On the right, Rico Peter. On the left, brakeman Jürg Egger. I'm Martin Haven. Sitting alongside me is US brakeman Kurt Tomasevich. Kurt, big slide for these guys.
Exactly. A huge start is needed here from Chuck Berkeley. They pushed a 5:14 in the first heat, a 5:15 here in the second heat. We mentioned it just like Andreas Drabal pushing Nick Cunningham Chuck is battling for a spot on this Olympic team. They're trying to prove something here. Pretty good start velocity, also a key thing that our selection committee looks at. And he's 0.07 of a second ahead right now, hoping to hold his top 10 position.
700s and creeping away, and 0.07 of a second is the tiniest margin, but he's only a couple of hundreds behind 8th place, 500s behind 7th place.
A little bit of a mistake there coming from curve 9 to 10. Got his height early in 10, but controlled it very nicely.
Well, that was a great line
Should
for him.
lead to great speed at the bottom of this track.
1:23.6, and he's accelerating to the line. 1100s in front. He was 100 ahead of the Swiss in the first heat, so he found an extra 1/10 of a second there.
Corey Butner's had a lot of success this season. He had a 9th place finish in Calgary, but then he finished in 4th, 3rd, and last week had a little bit of a problem finishing in 15th, but Corey hoping to move up into higher in the top 10. Very late out of the exit at Kreisel. Exit out of curve 9. Again, this is maybe his biggest mistake, although it's not huge. Takes a little tap on his left, but that sends the back end of the sled into a small skid.
High school basketball player.
Better.
Although maybe Chuck would have made a better basketball player. Corey Butner, one of 2 American ice sliders from California. Next up, Chris Spring of Canada with Jesse Lumsden, the world push champion behind him. Canada cleaned up in the push championships in Calgary. Heather Moyes taking the women's belt. Jesse Lumsden, the men's.
4th fastest start in the first heat at a 5:07. Jesse, I know, isn't satisfied with that. He's going to try to better that time. Not an easy thing to do, and I don't know if we've seen any sleds this heat better their start time.
Okay, 5:07.
He keeps it the same, which is very consistent. That's a good sign.
That'll annoy Lascelles Brown and Lyndon Rush with a 5:13.
51 kilometers an hour. I think that's the fastest velocity we've seen so far.
Yes, it is. So not only were they fast, but they got a lot of energy into the sled as well. And that's one of the things that having a big brakeman means, is that more of the maximum weight of the sled is in muscle, and less of it you're trying to push along.
Yeah, we want to push a light sled, but we want to be heavy once we get in the sled. So that difference in weight needs to be made up in body weight. Very late from Chris Spring coming out of curve 9 into 10.
Spring and Lyndon Rush 16 points apart in the World Cup rankings. Rush just ahead of his fellow Canadian. Spring may just be overturning that here. Tied for the lead with Butner and Berkeley.
So a tie for at least 9th place as they come down across the finish line. I know Jesse's pretty excited there, but might not be real excited. He's going to have to share the leader's box for the next sled at least.
Well, it's better to be in the leader's box than not.
Very true.
Well, they're tied for the lead with 8 to come. 16 points. They were behind Lyndon Rush. I think they just moved in front to Canada 1 in the 2-man.
Here you can see as he comes into the labyrinth here, he catches his height nice and early in curve 9, but comes off a little rough, and that might have been the reason that he falls back into a tie with Corey. Just a small mistake, but that can cost him. A little bit of a skid from curve 12 into 13.
Chris Spring, Jesse Lumsden tied for the lead with Corey Butner and Chuck Berkeley here in Eagles.
Happy birthday, Mom. I love you.
Well, as they stand, if no sleds fall between Chris Spring and Lyndon Rush, they will be tied on World Cup points for Canada 1 spot. Top of the ice now here in Igls, Austria. Thomas Florschutz and Kevin Kuska. The Man Mountain Kuska, surely this time in his last Olympic cycle, one of Germany's veteran soldiers. A 5:14 push behind Florschutz. Again, shows he's still got the power.
Yep, that's 100th of a second slower than the first heat. And if you remember, the first heat, he had a little bit of a problem. He picked the sled up out of the back end and carried it out of the grooves for just about first three or four steps. So I thought he was going to better his start time a little bit, but instead he falls back just 100.
Thomas Florschutz, the 2-man silver medalist in the Games in Torino 2010. Just missed out on the medals in the 4-man.
tide coming down as they come from curve 9 into curve 10. Pretty good drive.
A three-way tie for the lead.
Really good speed, though, 103.1 kilometers an hour. Yep, he's going to drop that, and he's going to stay in the green.
124.5 is great velocity. He will lead the race by 1/10 of a second. So the track's still giving time if you know where to look. Christoph Langen applauds that. The German sled leads in the green colours of Saxony. Still 7 to go.
Pretty good sled. You know, their start rank right now is second. Of course, we're going to see some really good start teams come up after this. But really good drive from Thomas.
No podium finishes this year, though, for Florschutz.
Timing was a little bit off on that hit. You can see the push bar came into Florschutz's stomach just a little bit. He liked to keep a little bit of separation there. But for the most part, that was a really good push. Something might have affected their velocity just a little bit. Not exceptional velocity, even with a 5:14, 5:15 push time. 5:15.
Thomas Florschutz, Kevin Kuska of Germany. Guess which is the brake man? Yeah, you won't need a second guess. Well, Florschutz still a strong athlete, but not as young as some on the block. And talking about that, Justin Cripps, one of the younger drivers, and Brian Barnett. What a push-starting team these guys could turn into in another couple of years. Barnett, fresh to bobsledding, never raced on ice. I'm assuming before his bobsled career. Doesn't seem like a likely thing.
Yeah, as opposed to Florschutz, Justin Cripps is a great pushing driver. 5:06 start time was the third best, just behind the two Latvian teams. So it's going to be really neat to see what they can do here.
Well, you can imagine what these two are going to produce in another year in the ice house. 5:06 first heat, 5:10 in the second.
Fell off 0.04 of a second. That's a little bit disappointing for them.
Well, let's see the velocity. 50.8 kilometers an hour. It's not the best, but it is still good.
0.07 of a second ahead now, so they improved their lead by 1/100th.
27-year-old Cripps, originally from Hawaii. This is what he needs, another fast, consistent run.
Florschutz had a great bottom half of the track, and we'll see if Cripps can match that. He has, so far, a little bit better speed, and that's why his lead is now 0.09 of a second, but a little bit slower there. From curve 9, 10 into the labyrinth, slowly starting to fall back.
Is there enough ice for him to drop behind, or will he stay in front by 0.03 of a second in front of Thomas Florschutz? That is a big, big result for Cripps. Another consistently fast drive. Best results of the season, 3 8th places. He has now topped that. That is PBs all round.
Yeah, if he wants to move into the top 6, he's got to hope that the tie for 5th in front of him, one of those teams falls back by 0.07 of a second. But that was a great run from Justin.
Well, you want a program to have strength in depth, and Canada has that.
Here's between curve 13 and 14, excuse me, 11 and 12. You can see a little bit of a problem coming into curve 13 as the back end skids and slides up there. But, you know, at that point, you're moving really quickly, and you can't lose a whole lot of time with only one curve left.
Another beast of a brakeman started driving after the Vancouver Games. And Cripps, wow. It's going to be a battle on next year to be the best of the Canadians. Okay, here we go, now into the fastest starting teams. The two teams from Latvia tied with each other at the bottom of the track, but Latvia 1 was 100th in front of Latvia 2. This is Oskars Kibermanis in Latvia 2 with Vairis Leiboms behind him. 5:02 start. Can they get into the 4s?
Yeah, we mentioned it that I don't think any teams yet have improved their start time in the second heat. They pushed a 5:02 in the first heat. Just fall back 1/100th of 5:03. Good load into the sled. Small wave in curve 2. 51 kilometers an hour. That's the same start velocity that we've seen so far.
Just 20 years old, the second youngest driver in the field, Oskar Kibermanis, ex-decathlete, who has turned into some sensational bobsleigh driver already.
Driving really hard at the top of the track, and driving too much can cause you a lot of time. So his lead has gone from 0.18 of a second to 15 and now only 8. He's going to lose this lead.
Started driving like Justin Cripps in 2010-11 season. 102 kilometers an hour is not enough to keep him in front.
Yeah, over 1 kilometer an hour slower coming out of curve 10.
And how far does he drop into third place? The gaps are so tiny here. Justin Cripp's personal best just got better. Sanders Prusis shakes his head a little. But this is a huge talent for the future of Latvian bobsledding. Like their men's skeleton program, their men's bobsled program, the sky would appear to be the limit.
20 years old, he's got a huge future in front of him. I know he's pretty disappointed right now, falling out of the awards from 6th into possibly 7th, unless another team in front of him falls back. You can see that brakeman really doesn't drop his knees into the sled. You can see his hind end really high in the air, so it's really hard to really keep your hips with the sled and have a good connection with that sled as you push. You know, every 100th of a second counts.
Well, Boris Leibom's the brakeman. Behind there is new to the sport. Imagine how good they'll be when they're good, technically. Justin Cripps leads with 5 to come. Lots of noise from the Latvian fans here at Igls, Austria. Welcome back, everybody. 5 sleds to go. World Cup number 7 for two-man bobsleigh. Martin Haven, and alongside me, US brakeman Kurt Tomasevich calling the action. And these are the start monsters, the track record holders. Not that lot, the guys at the top. Oskars Melbardis and Dauman Striskins. Track record 496.
Pushed a 5:01 in the first heat, 5 flat in the second heat. That's just amazing seeing those guys push off that starting block. They own the track record, excuse me, the start record at 496. The track conditions don't quite allow for that to be touched today, but 51.1 kilometers an hour. That's also incredible velocity.
Tied for 5th after the first heat with their teammates. So 2 jobs here. 1, beat your teammates. 2, you're only a 10th out of the silver medal position. He wants to get into the podium spots.
Yeah, he's had a lot of success in two-man. He's used to being in the top 6, even a couple of podium finishes. He's hungry for more, definitely, and that start time proves it.
1:02.4, not as quick as the last couple of sleds. 1 kilometre an hour down. The gap's coming down from 2200s to 500s. He's in trouble. If he holds it together, he may not have the lead in the race. He drops behind, and he is still just in front of his teammate. But Cripps and Barnett, the leaders, are now heading into a top 5 career best finish.
That means Thomas Florschuetz finishes in at least 6th position, too.
Yeah, who'd have thought? Melbardis, still in his first Olympic cycle. He pushed as a brakeman in Vancouver.
Really high in curve 10. That's where he lost all that speed. Yeah, he had a huge lead coming out of curve 9, but curve 10 cost him. Hit that lip, I think, and from curve 11 and all the way down through the labyrinth. That's just going to cause you to be late and have even more problems.
There's Dauman Striskins, and behind him, Oskars Melbardis looking downcast at a top 6 finish, and that's, or top 8 finish, that's how good, that's how high his expectations are. 4 to go. Here is our two-man world champion, Francesco Friedrich, and the man who won junior and senior two-man world titles behind him last year, Janis Becker. They're your current leaders.
Yeah, Friedrich places really high among the brakemen as push athletes in their German program. So a 5:06 start time, that's pretty impressive, because in the first heat they had a 5:11, so they dropped that by 0.05 of a second.
Might be quite entertaining if there's a World Push Championships next year to allow the drivers in as well and see how they fare against the real beasts.
Yeah, so he's going to pull away for quite a while here until maybe the bottom half of the track, where Cripps seemed to have a lot of success. Friedrich could match that, but right now he's definitely pulling away.
A little quicker than Cripps, who was 89.2 at that stage. Cripps into the 1:03s at the next timing marker. Oh, that's a good exit. Little tap, but he'll do it. 1:28.
Cripps had 1:03.1, so Cripps was a little faster down here, but that lead's too big right now. Friedrich's going to hold on and finish at least in 4th position.
Yes, he will. 2 tenths in front, 51.97. Justin Cripps and Brian Barnett. Their career best result in two-man for Cripps, at least top 5 guaranteed. And with still a couple of tight battles in front of them, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that our top 2 at the moment may end up on the podium.
here's where they really improved their position here with a better start time by 0.05 of a second, which is not an easy thing to do, but just a great load. Nice and smooth by the brakeman.
Well, Friedrich, only 23, still looks so young and almost slight. His speed is remarkable.
Yeah, his exit out of curve 9 wasn't perfect, but kept the sled straight, even though he took that little tap on the left side.
There is Francesco Friedrich and Janis Becker, good 6 inches taller. Friedrich's touch behind the driving rings is just remarkable. 3 sleds to go here in Igls, Austria. Martin Haven and Kurt Tomasevich watching the action. Alexander Zubkov, cool, calm and collected. 3rd place, the Russian, 200ths away from 2nd, but nearly a 1/4 of a second away from a first heat lead. And listen to the noise that will accompany the takeoff for Zubkov and Dmitry Cherenkov.
Für den russischen Bob, für Alexander Zubkov, Dmitry Cherenkov.
Like a number of drivers, Zubkov starting on the front handles. He's not the youngest man now, but his control is just astonishing.
Yeah, almost 40 years old. I think he's going to be 40 at the Olympics, actually. Pushed a 5.12. For a 40-year-old to be a part of a 5.12 push time, that's incredible. It doesn't matter who's on the back of that sled, but his advantage is in how he drives, and it's in his equipment. So, you know, he might be in the red right now, only 0.06 of a second back, but my guess is he's going to reel that in and pass the Germans here.
Well, he's trying to beat Francesco Friedrich, a 23-year-old. How much age difference? Alexander Zubkov's daughter is racing in Koenigsegg this week. That's the age difference. Good high line, nails the exit. Great speed for Zubkov.
There it is, 0.07 of a second back now. Only 0.02 of a second. Is probably going to turn green here by the exit of this curve.
He's going to dip to the line by 0.03 of a second. He beats the world champion. And Pierre Luder's former 2-man standout medalist as a driver. He laughs as Zubkov punches the air with delight.
Yeah, what's scary is that Zubkov is a better 4-man driver than he is a 2-man driver. A lot of success this year in 2-man, of course. He's ranked number 3 in the world, but number 4 is where he specializes.
Yeah.
Now, great lines coming out of curve 10. Really not much you can critique. He's just an experienced pilot, knows where to put the sled, and he's able to do it.
Speeds are right up there with this Austrian-built Valna sled. There is Alexander Zubkov, and Dmitry Cherenkov behind him. Good start, good drive. And that lays down the gauntlet. He has the lead with 2 to come. Bert Hefty, since we got back to Europe, has been unbeaten in 2-man, 1 in Winterberg, 1 in Samoritz. His first ever victory, either as a brakeman or as a driver, in Samoritz, Switzerland. What a day for him last Saturday. Well, we're only a couple of hours from Samoritz. You can hear the cowbells with the CIS fans at the top there. They've been fired up by last weekend's victory, but it's going to take Superman to drive this sled into the win, or a big mistake from Stephen Holcomb.
You know, being Hefty, he's really got to be careful because Zubkov behind him is only 0.02 of a second away from that silver medal position. So Hefty, you know, I know he wants to look ahead and try to catch Holcomb, who is 0.02 of a second ahead, but this is going to be a really close battle between Zubkov and Hefty right here.
Long slide from Hefty. That'll take away a couple of tenths. Only 0.06 up. Good control out of corner 9. 103 kilometers, just a fraction slower than Zubkov. 124.5, a fraction quicker.
Holds at 0.06 of a second ahead.
Unbelievably close at the line. 0.05 of a second. The blink of an eye. Zubkov was actually faster on the after the first heat than after the second heat than his first, but Hefty found another minuscule addition to his time as well and just crept away. Bert Hefty leads with just the final sled to come. Thomas Amrine, Bert Hefty, 5:09 Not the fastest start, Kurt, but good driving.
Yeah, definitely. You can see as he comes through Kreisel, great entrance, controls it early. And as out of his exit at Kreisel, though, comes out maybe a little early, and you can see the back end of the sled kind of breaks to the right. That's his maybe only mistake, but we'll see if it's worth 0.22 of a second and see if he can catch Holcomb, who's way out in front.
Most of his big successes came in two-man, breaking Martin Annan, world champion in four-man, breaking Ivo Röck in 2007. Now Ben Hefty leading the race with just Stephen Holcomb to come for the USA. Well, these new BMW sleds introduced into full competition action this season have just moved the US game on another half a step. With Stephen Langton behind him, fifth fastest push, but a great first drive to lead.
Steve Langton in the back of that sled, a perfectionist. He really has a great idea of what a good push will look like. He's able to match that. A 5:13 start time this heat, a little bit slower than their first heat start time of a 5:08.
Holcomb needs to produce the goods here. He's had a perfect record in the States, fastest in every heat, won every race. But since he came to Europe, 7th and 5th, let's see if he can turn this into gold. 1600ths of a second. He's now creeping away again.
That's really impressive. He wasn't quite as fast at the first 50-meter mark, but so that velocity didn't let him hold that lead as really extended as he would like, but now he's extending that lead even further. Now up to 1700ths of a second, 2100ths of a second.
125.1, better speed again. He's going to extend his first round advantage by a whisker. 2300ths in front. Stephen Holcomb wins. If it was a single heat race, he'd still have won by 100th of a second, but he wins by nearly a quarter of a second. Win number 5 of the season for Stephen Holcomb, the four-man expert of the last couple of seasons.
Absolutely. This is putting an exclamation point on confidence, because Holcomb and Langton and Chris Fote, who pushed Holcomb last weekend, we haven't had the ultimate success so far in Europe that we had in North America. So to see this happen here in Igls, which Holcomb has never won in two-man, that's pretty awesome to see this.
Well, don't forget, in Lake Placid, a couple of seasons ago, he was two-man and four-man world champion. He's the four-man Olympic champion. That was good, no question, Holky, that was good. Holcomb and Langton victorious here in Austria. Well, they didn't do it by beating everybody at the start, which is the accepted way. They did it by beating everybody on the trip down the track. And as ever, Kurt, it's the combination. It's the men, it's the machine, it's everything together. It all has to work perfectly. To win in a field of this class needs everything to be special. And Stephen Holcomb had everything special. All the stars are aligned. 2300ths in front of a very tight battle behind him. And Justin Cripps, 5th place. To me, that's the other standout story in that top 10 ranking. And for Edwin van Kalker, a top 10 finish needed. Unfortunately, not coming here. Well, as with every race, for every winner, there's somebody else with a hard luck story. And again, we come down, this is the final race where points will count for Olympic selections, but it's all about the whole season. It's not one race. It's not one run in one race. It's the whole thing put together.
Definitely, the countries, each country has in addition to the international qualifications, each country definitely has their national qualification as well, that they have to meet different standards. Some teams met those tonight, some teams did not. There's different criteria for push athletes as well.
There you see Stephen Holcomb chatting to Brian Scheimer. Here Mike Kahn coaching these US athletes. Corey Butler goes over to offer his congratulations. Corey tied for 9th with Chris Spring. And Alexander Zubkov, I'm not sure I've ever seen him looking more relaxed in his entire career. You would hardly know that the biggest days of his life are coming up in the next 4 or 5 weeks. He just seems so relaxed about the whole deal.
Yeah, you have to assume there's a lot of pressure on him hosting the Olympics, being the gold medal favorite, I would call, in these Sochi games. But yeah, it looks pretty relaxed right now. But one more two-man race to go in Königssee, Germany next week, and then the Olympic race in Sochi.
Well, the Russians won't go to Königssee. They're going straight to Sochi to get lots more home track ice time. And we'll see a slightly different looking World Cup feed in Königssee. But for everybody, ice time, more training, And I guess, Kurt, as well, some rest, because you've got to have that little bit of a layoff, otherwise you're just going to be exhausted by Sochi.
You know, there is a little bit of break between that last race and the first Olympic race, but for the most part, teams are going to try to either fine-tune their teams, their equipment, or take a break and get a little bit more rest.
And the mental rest will be as important as the physical rest, I think, for everybody. The Olympics are going to take their toll. Welcome back to Innsbruck in Austria, where Stephen Holcomb claims win number 5 of a standout two-man World Cup season and seems certain to be the World Cup champion. 77 points ahead of Bert Hefti. It requires Hefti to perform miracles in the final race of the season, or Holcomb to have an absolute disaster, neither of which look likely at the moment. John Jackson of Great Britain in 19th place, ahead of Nikolai Astrati, who didn't race here. So Jackson's points in St. Moritz this morning and here this afternoon, even though he didn't make the second heat, may be vital. Flowers being presented to the 3rd place Russians, the 2nd place Swiss, and now our winning US team. Stephen Langton on the left, Stephen Holcomb on the right. And if you're going to peak anywhere in a pre-Olympic season, having a great start is great for momentum, for confidence. But having a great finish to the season is where it is at. And Holcomb and Langton producing the goods here, Kurt, as you said, to win on a track where they've never tasted gold before in two-man. Yeah, in the first heat, they set that track record. You know, it's a little bit different track with a different placement of the finish line, but that's just huge for confidence. We know that the sled's running fast. Even without the fastest start of the field, Holcomb's able to drive that sled and come away with the victory. And US bobsledding at the moment looking very strong indeed as we head towards the games in Sochi. Of course, that leaves the selectors with lots to do to decide which of the crews of brakemen will go to Russia to represent their country. Well, let's hear now from our top 3. John Morgan is down there in the finish area.
And bronze medal, Team Zubkov, Dmitry Alexander, congratulations for 2 great drives down the track.
Прекрасных спусков по трассе.
Делали свою работу, делали работу на старте, и я делал работу на финише, поэтому получилось великолепно.
I'm doing my work with my team, so that's why it was perfect.
Another day at the office for him. Congratulations. And now over to Team FT. Happy, 2nd place here?
Yeah, I'm happy with the 2nd place with my new brakeman, Thomas, and yeah, we are happy.
You've had a good start to the season. Congratulations to the silver medal. And Team Langton. Steve, how those 2 heats make you feel?
Pretty good. You know, last year we debuted the BMW M2 prototype and didn't fare so well. We finished 14th and had some troubles. Just let's come back this year and redeem ourselves. You know, we had a lot of hard work and focus over the last summer, and then this season we've been really tweaking the sled, looking to get it faster, and I think we showed that this sled can be really fast, so I'm excited.
Congratulations, Steve.
Our top 3 finishers started 8th, 5th and 7th fastest in that order. It's not all over here after the first 60 meters, but everything has to fire. Well, my thanks to John Morgan, to Kurt Tomasevich, and to the rest of the FIBT TV crew here in Igls in Austria. Thanks to you two for joining us, and don't forget, on Sunday we still have the women's bobsleigh and the 4-man competition to come from this Olympic track in Austria. Till then, from me, Martin Haven, it's goodbye for now.